In this video, I will show you step by step how I pushed cinematic realism in Unreal Engine to the next level. I will give you a complete guide on how I remade one of my favorite horror scenes in cinema history. So by the end of this video, you will have a complete cinematic setup, a high-resolution metahuman, and a fully animated sequence rendered out. The whole breakdown is based on my recent Saw project. If you haven't seen it, here is a quick trailer.
Can you imagine what it feels like to have someone sit you down and tell you that you're dying?
I want to play a game.
And the clock's ticking for you.
How much blood will you shed to stay alive, Michael?
By the end, we will take a look at the final piece and how over 100 shots came together. But before that, I will show you the entire process of how I built each single scene. I want to quickly start by showing you guys my PC specs. I'm not a huge tech person, but here are my PC specs for those who want to know, and I've been told that they're quite solid, not exactly high-end, but definitely capable. Unreal Engine ran smoothly throughout the entire project, even though I had over 40 different cinematic sequences coming together. On to the project settings. Now it was time to set up my project. These project settings are focused on creating realism, maintaining a solid performance, and creating realistic reflections. So let's create a new project by opening Unreal Engine. Then select the third template option and enable the starter content. Give your project a name of your choice and hit create. Once inside Unreal Engine, we can now create the mirror material. So right click into your content browser and select material. Name it m_mirror and open it. Now press 3 on your keyboard and click into this area to create a color constant. Change the color to white and connect it to your base color. Now press 1 on your keyboard and click 3 times into the space to create constants. You can change the value for 2 of them to 1 and leave the third one on 0. Now connect them to metallic, specular, and the 0 one to roughness. Now search in the details panel for high quality and check this option. Now hit apply and save your material. Open up your project settings and select the rendering option. Now scroll down to the reflection part and choose Lumen as the reflection method. Change the resolution to 2048 and enable hardware ray tracing. Now make sure to select Hit Lighting for reflections and restart your project. Once restarted, you can create a level. Now open it and put some lights in there by going to Windows and then select the light mixer. Just select all the options and now you have a basic level setup. Now we can finally add the post-process volume to tweak the last few settings. Once it is placed in your scene, we can select the post-process volume and now we can check the infinity option. Let's select Lumen as our global lighting and then search for reflections. Choose Lumen once again and increase the reflection quality. Also make sure to switch the ray lighting mode to Hit Lighting for reflection. And finally check the high quality option and you are good to go. As you can see, we have now a crispy clean and great reflection. And for later on, we will switch our viewport to a different layout. Because later on we can then see on the left side our camera and on the right side we can work on the actual animations. Now we will create a realistic metahuman with high resolution textures. With this part I actually changed my mind. You guys simply gonna get 2 metahumans from the description down below that you can download for free. One is a female metahuman that you can get for free on 3D Scan Store, and the other one is a male metahuman that I actually paid for. I can only give him to you guys with the customizations I made for him to look like Michael. So I am giving you guys these metahumans right away simply because I already made an entire tutorial on this step. So for everyone who actually wants to learn this step, you guys can check out this video right here, and it's the exact same metahuman that we would have created anyways. Other than that, just download the Unreal Engine project that I have linked down below, and then make sure you have your Metahuman plugin and the Metahuman lighting from Fab downloaded and installed. And now you can open up my Unreal Engine project, head to the Metahuman folder, and you can see 2 Metahumans. Now you can simply migrate them to the project where we created the project settings a second ago. On to the next part, building an environment and choosing the right assets. For the environment, I simply used free assets from Sketchfab and from the official Fab market. I will not redo this process, but I will quickly step into the project and guide you through the entire environment. Alright, we are now inside the environment, and for the walls I simply placed a cube and started to scale it in a way that it would look like a wall, and then I simply applied a material, and other than that I just placed assets all the way around the room, and all these assets you can find down in the description. I made an entire list so you guys can simply copy these assets and build the room for yourself. But what was even more important for the entire project was the Venus flytrap. And I was extremely happy when a talented 3D artist reached out to me and modeled the entire Venus flytrap with all its complexities. He did an amazing job, so please make sure to check out his channel. He will also drop a video on the entire process of his side, and on top of that he will release the trap for a small price so that you guys can actually use it. Now let's talk about lighting. The lighting itself is really easy to create, and from the different lighting sources I only used the light bulb. But the difficulty was maintaining a consistent lighting setup between all my different shots while also keeping it organized. So that's why we're now going to create a simple lighting setup together. We start by checking the references and see where the light sources are actually located in the room. Then we place fluorescent lights throughout the entire environment for ourselves, and place point lights right next to the fluorescent lights. We're gonna name these point lights as environment lights. And here are the settings for my environment lights. It really depends on the size of your room, but generally I always had a very low intensity, and the light color was the following. Now we will create a cinematic sequence, name it whatever you want, open it up, and make sure to enable this automatic key option. And now we're going to simply search for the environment lights that we created, and we're going to keyframe them into our sequencer. I'm going to do that for every single environment light that we created really quick. Great. Now we have all the environment lights in our sequencer. And the next step is actually to create a transform path. So we're going to hit the plus icon, hit transform, and we're going to keyframe this also. We're going to do that for all the remaining environment lights, so I'm going to see you in a second. Alright, we have now all the keyframes that we actually need, so one on intensity and one on transform for all the environment lights, right? So what we're going to do is simply add a camera so we can create a little cinematic shot. Just place a camera into your scene, switch the perspective to your camera, and drive it in front of your Metahuman. So once you have your camera placed, you can adjust the settings. I use the current focal length of 85, and I changed the crop setting to a cinematic output, right? So now you have the environment lights, you have your cinematic shot, and we're going to select all of these keyframes, and we're going to drag them behind our starting position. And the reason for that is that we can now start to adapt the position of our environment lights. So for example, I can simply drag and adapt the position of the environment light right here. I'm going to make it a little bit brighter so you guys can actually see the difference. And I placed keyframes right here automatically. And once I close the sequencer, it pops back to the default position. Right? So our level doesn't get affected by the changes we do in the cinematic sequencer. So once I open it back, we have our lighting once again in the position that we just created. I'm going to delete it once again and get back to the next point. Great. So this is just the environment lights, right? So the actual cinematic lighting is created by another point light that we're going to add into the scene. So we're going to simply change the intensity to 0, keyframe it once again into our cinematic sequencer, and also add a transform path, and keyframe it as well, select them, and also drag them behind our starting position. Same reason, because we can now start to customize it a little bit, and it will not affect our world, right? So when I close it, our level sequence is not affected. This is the basic lighting setup that we're going to need. Now, this doesn't look cinematic at all, because we need to still customize our point light in a way that it would fit into the scene. Now, this should be done when we actually know what type of situation are we animating, but I will still show you guys 3 tips how we can make this single shot look cinematic just with the lighting setup that we just created. So tip number 1 is for your main cinematic point light, you need to find the right place for this point light. And the main tip is to keep your intensity very low, because when the intensity is very low, it gets that cinematic look. All the details are still visible, and when you get a little bit over shiny, the details get blown away, right? So keep the intensity low. That's the main takeaway. And obviously you need to find the right light color. So I chose a light color with the following settings. So the second tip is for the environment lights. As you can see, our image is still pretty dark, and now you can customize the environment lights in a way where they enlighten your scene a little bit. And as you can see, I did that by just customizing the position of each environment light and to create some highlights on his face, right? On his right side, right here, and also on the Venus flytrap. If the scene is still too dark, you can simply search for your camera and select it, and in the details panel you search for exposure, and now you can tweak the exposure settings in order to make it brighter. Now the third tip will give you full control over each single light. You will sooner or later run into the issue that one of your cinematic lights affects your environment. So for example, right here I created a scene and already placed the environment lights. But if I want to add my cinematic light, it also affects the wall behind it. Now we can easily fix that by selecting our cinematic light, and in the details panel we can search for channel. These light channels function like a walkie-talkie. So currently my light sends on all 3 channels, and when we click on the wall we can see that it only gets its information from the first channel. So we can simply turn off channel number 1 on our cinematic light, and now it doesn't affect our wall anymore. So this is a great way of controlling your lights in smaller spaces. And as you can see, we were able to transform this scene to this scene with simply creating an easy lighting setup. Now on to animation. We will now animate a scene together, and I will show you a few more animation tips. So let's open the cinematic sequencer that we just created with the lighting setup. We will now add our Metahuman into the cinematic sequencer, so drag and drop it right here. And now we need to figure out how long the scene that we're going to animate actually lasts. So we're going to animate this scene together. So we will now need to head into our editing software, and I already clipped this entire scene that we're going to animate. So we head to export, media, and then we're going to choose waveform audio. Yeah, we're going to give it a name, and we're going to hit export. Now we have our exported audio, and we can simply drag and drop it into Unreal Engine, where I created a small folder for it. And then we head back to our sequencer, and we're going to go to track and then use audio track, hit the plus icon and search for the name that we gave him. Great, now we know how long the scene is actually going to last, and we're going to make the scene a little bit longer than that, right? Because we want a little bit of space to play around with. So the basic animation setup is done, and now we can actually start to animate. So we're going to go to mixer mode, and we're going to select a breathing idle animation. So I chose this one, and then you can tweak a few settings. I lowered the overdrive, then go to download, and then choose without skin, and then hit download. Once the idle is downloaded, you can drag and drop it into your content browser. You can leave the options on default and just hit import all. Now we actually need to retarget this animation onto our Metahuman. So we're going to go to Metahuman, common, once again common, and then we have a Metahuman IK retargeter by default. So we're going to open it, and now we can see a source and a target. The source is our IK mixer mode, and the source preview mesh will be the idle, right? And our target will be our IK Metahuman, and the target preview mesh will be the male version of our IK Metahuman. So this is basically our two preview meshes, and as you can see, one has a T pose while the other has an A pose, and we need to actually fix our posing position from the Metahuman. So we're going to go to target, then go to, on the top left, go to edit target pose, select that, and now we actually need to choose the arm. Now the main task is to create a T-pose that fits perfectly onto the T-pose of our mixer mode character. So I'm just simply going to rotate our arm by, let's say, 40 degrees and do the same with our right arm. Also rotate it by 40 degrees, and then we're going to change the perspective to top and going to rotate our lower arm by, let's say, minus 30 degrees and do the same with our left arm. So we want to switch over and rotate it by minus 30 degrees. Now, this should be it. This should be totally fine. So we can go back to run retargeter. Now select the idle and see if it actually works. And that looks great. Now let's select root settings and let's zero out our translation offset. And now we can actually export this animation into our folder that I already created. So hit export. Once exported, we can go into our sequencer. And now we can actually go to our control rig, go right click, choose import animation section. And now we can find the idle that we just exported, right? And as you can see, we don't see it in the camera right here, but we can see it on the right hand side that we have an idle animation going on. And this idle animation is our basic layer, and we will now animate on top of this layer, so we don't actually need to animate this entire breathing animation. Now we can animate on top of our control rig by simply hitting the plus icon and then choosing additive. Now we have a second control rig, and we can open it up and create keyframes for all of the bones below by simply going right here and creating a keyframe. Now we automatically have keyframes for all the bones below. And if we want to actually change a bone, we can change it right here. And an automatic keyframe is now created simply because we have this option enabled. And this makes the entire animation process so much easier. So I'm going to delete this keyframe right here. And now the main task is to bring our Metahuman into a squatting position, just like in the scene that we're going to animate. So I'm going to do that really quick, going to speed up the entire process, but you guys can still follow along. So I actually started by creating a transform path and also keyframe his transform position, because we're going to change that and position him more towards the corner of the room. Yes, so then I started to reposition him right here, more towards the corner of the room, because Michael is in the scene in front of one of the fluorescent lights. And then I also started to adapt the camera position. And then I actually started to customize his body position. So I just made him kneel down or squat down. And then the most important part is basically his upper body. So this is just a lot of checking with the reference shots and customizing the position of your Metahuman, and also obviously of the camera. I then actually started to customize our lighting positions from the cinematic light and the environment lights. So I positioned the environment lights around our Metahuman, and I didn't need all of them, so 2 of them I actually turned off. And for the cinematic light, I just placed it in front of his face with a very low intensity. Alright, for the next part, we're actually going to do his facial expressions, and I created one already, but I'm going to show you how you can do it yourself. So let's head to animation mode, that's important, then go to poses, and then you can choose from Metahumans, common, post library, face, and then expressions, and then you have a bunch of different expressions. If for some reason the post library doesn't show up, simply go to Quixel Bridge and download one of Epic Games' Metahumans. Once downloaded, the post library should actually show up. So what I did, I went down and I chose the, the anxiety expressions. Then I selected the controls. If I would select all these controls and just hit paste, I would get the exact expressions on this entire face. I don't want that, right? I want to mix these expressions. So what I did is I searched for mouth, and then I made sure that I select all the mouth parts, and then I just click paste pose. And now I have the mouth part of the anxiety expression, right? And then I went ahead and did the same for the brow part. So I selected all the brow parts and used the concern expression and then went to paste pose. Now I mean, it looks good, but I wanted it more like with a bit of aggressive approach. So I customized it a bit more and made sure that his eyebrows are raised outside more and inside pointed downwards, right? So this is basically expression I created, and then I went ahead and actually customized his jaw because he has an open mouth. So I went ahead to open up his mouth a little bit more. So this is the starting position of his facial expression. Now we can actually start to animate, but before that, let's hop into our editing software once again. And this time we're gonna export our reference shot with the actual footage. Once exported, you can drag and drop it into your content browser, and from there on drag into your scene, and then you can drag it into your cinematic sequencer and click on yes, and then you actually have your footage inside your cinematic sequencer that you can perfectly use as a reference. So now I can use the reference shot and see exactly when, for example, his head starts to move. So I then just place a keyframe, adapt the position of his head, and go through the entire sequence in that way. It is actually also important to note that whenever I created a keyframe for one bone, I simply created keyframes for the rest of the control rig as well. The goal is to create rough poses of Michael and get like a solid base. Later on we can add details and really get the timing down. I do the same for the facial part, but here I'm already a little bit more specific. So I really try to already replicate the expression of Michael in this exact moment. So I do that by finding one emotion that fits as a base. And from there on, I simply divide Michael's face into 3 parts and try to really mimic each part on their own by, for example, searching the mouth part and then going through each preset to see what fits the best. I did this for the entire sequence and came up with this animation. As you can see, I didn't animate the hands yet because it's just supposed to be a rough animation. Now it's time to add the details and animate his hands. So basically what I did is I tried to figure out the exact same position or the exact position where his hands are going to be visible and where he's supposed to actually hold still and look at the knife. So I figured out that it's this position, and I already placed the hands right here and made like a rough position on how they could hold the knife. And let's bring in the knife that I also already placed. And what I did then is beforehand, I told you guys to have keyframes for every single position or for every single pose that you're going to create. So I went ahead to the arms, the lower arm and the hand, and deleted all the keyframes past that, right? So for the entire arms, we only have the keyframe right here. And what we're going to do right now is basically connect the knife into our right hand of the metahuman by selecting the knife. And now we're going to choose in the animation mode constraints, hit the plus icon and choose parent constraint. And now we're going to select our right hand. So we now created a constraint, and this basically means that our knife is constantly now attached to our hand. So we want that a little bit earlier, so we can just drag the keyframe to the beginning of the scene. And now as you can see, the knife is basically part of his hand, and we're gonna do the same for the right hand, but this time the right hand wants to be attached to the knife and not the other way around. So let's customize the position of the hand a bit better. We're gonna go to constraints, choose parent, and now choose the knife. And now our left hand is also attached to the knife. So now we gotta simply figure out at what point does he gonna stand up. All right, so basically right here. And now we can keyframe this constraint while still having selected the left hand. And now this is basically the part where the hand is attached to the knife. And what we can do now is to select our upper arm, create a keyframe, and also the lower arm, and create a keyframe, simply because we don't want our arm to change at all during this period. And after these keyframes, we can now drop our lower arm and animate it in a way that it looks like he's in the motion of actually standing up. For the last few details, I animated the fingers in a way that it looks like they are still getting a grip on the knife. Then I played around to get a better timing for the entire scene, but you don't actually need to worry about that too much because we're gonna get the right timing later on in the editing software. So my final version looked like this. Now onto the final part, rendering. This is the easiest part and nothing fancy at all. Make sure that your movie render queue is enabled in the plugins. And when you render out a scene, just change the file type to a PNG sequence. Make sure to render in the right frame rate that you want, and that's it. We can now import the clip into our editing software and lay them on top of the original footage. Since we gave the scene a few extra frames, we can play around with the replay speed. So this was the general approach of each single scene. We will now take a look at the final result of mine, where over 40 different scenes came together to recreate the entire Saw trap from Michael.
Hello, Michael. I want to play a game. The device around your neck is a death mask. The mask is on a spring timer. If you do not locate the key in time, the mask will close. Taking into account that you are at a great disadvantage here, I am going to give you a hint as to where I've hidden the key, so listen carefully. The hint is this. It's right before your eyes. Live or die. Make your choice.
Fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you?
Now that's it from my side. I hope this tutorial went a bit more into detail and you guys actually learned something new. If so, make sure to like and subscribe, and see you on the next project.